books and movies and you name it, it has become like a Gone with the Wind was to the Civil War. And yet we have to remember it was this really global event of epic, disastrous proportions. And even now, as recently as less than 2 years ago, when the submersible imploded, when it was taking Titanic tourists down to see the wreck, it's still a dangerous and sad story. But it is immediately compelling. And what I find fascinating, Pete, immediately after the sinking, it was sensationalized in books and magazines. There was a silent film actress on board named Dorothy Gibson. She made the first Titanic movie of her own experience surviving the wreck, wearing the very clothes she was wearing on that night. And each generation seems to get a jolt of Titanic fever. Walter Lord wrote the definitive book, A Night to Remember. That got everybody amped up about it. Then they made a movie version of A Night to Remember, and another one called Titanic with Barbara Stanwyck and Clifton Webb. Boom. 1985, Robert Ballard, the oceanographer, discovered the wreck. That was, for me, a very pivotal moment because it rejuvenated all of my natural excitement for Titanic. And then forget it. James Cameron, 1997, the Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet movie, that will forever introduce the story to generations of fans. You've got 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds who are captivated by the story.
It is remarkable. I remember where I was when I heard that they had found it. And I was just a kid. I was washing dishes at Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Wow.
I had my arms all the way deep, grabbing, chicken pans out of the thing. And someone came in and said, they found the Titanic. Like we've been waiting 80 years for this to happen, or 70, I guess, at that point. And then it quickly got back to me back in the kitchen. And I'm like, wait, what? They found the Titanic. And it was like amazing to me, So it's just such a funny thing because it does have this impact on us. And
I was so gripped.
It's still funny lives.
While we're still on the subject of finding the wreck and Dr. Ballard, I've always had this connection to Milton Long, this particular passenger. And my book is about Milton Long and our connection. I sort of fill in the gaps about his shortened, abbreviated, sad life. But I knew in my mind, whether or not you believe in the metaphysical of reincarnation, but I knew there was a connection with Milton. And that week that Dr. Ballard had found the wreck, he was arguably the most famous man in the world that week. He was on the cover of every newspaper and every magazine, everywhere. And I knew something inside of me said, I have to reach out to him. That, they had pinpointed the wreck, but they hadn't made a dive. So I knew I had to somehow be involved. I tracked him down at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute using that old-fashioned tool, the phone book. I got him through the phone book. I get on the phone. The receptionist says, who's calling? I said, we used to have phones that you hold in your hand, like with wires and things. And I said, this is Nelson Aspen calling for Dr. Ballard. Please hold. He comes back on the line and he says, hello, Milton? And he addressed me as Milton. And that's when I knew, when I knew my woo-woo metaphysical paranormal connection wasn't just mumbo jumbo.
We are absolutely going to get to your reincarnation thing. And this is a great tease. We're going to come back to that. But I want to, before that, when you go to these exhibits, I was at the one that was in Vegas. I don't know if it's still there or not, but they had that one in Bodies together. And then last year I went to the one in Seattle. I had one of the Titanic experts on the show, so I do my own exploration.
You're a Titaniac. Just admit it. You are a Titaniac.
I am. My next door neighbor loves the movie Titanic. We talk about that whenever we see it. But the thing that always interests me is, and because it's just a treasure trove of these things, like, there are these, just for example, there are these Swedish dudes who don't know each other, but they're Swedish dudes and they've started their life in America and they've come back and they're going to, okay, you guys follow me by 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 3 months and everything will be set up. We're basically ready to go. And then they're gone. And the family, I just think about these incredible stories of these entrepreneurs that had come to America and established it, saved up enough money to take the Titanic back, all these things, or their families on the boat. There's so many of these stories where you could just follow off in that direction, whether it's Milton or Lars Larson or whoever it's going to be. And I'm making Lars Larson up, but there are a lot of people on this boat for a variety of reasons going, and then that's it, snuffed out, and whatever was going to happen in your life is over. And a lot back then, you were a lot more reliant on each other to survive and to get through the next day. So there's drama in every cabin. It's not just steerage, it's all of them. There's so many neat things to talk about. And you wonder, like, all these what ifs.
I love telling people, you forget, these were human beings. We're just like we are human beings today, although they were living in a very repressed Edwardian time. But there was drama and intrigue and passion and lots of scandalous stuff was going on Titanic as well. We didn't live in a TMZ world the way we do today, where we know everything. So it's exciting to uncover the past, and we do that through a lot of these exhibitions as well.
Yeah, it is amazing. So the reincarnation piece is interesting. One, because we just don't know, and there's a lot of evidence that it's out there. But also something like this, where like these lives are unexpectedly snuffed out, these spirits have to go somewhere, and if the inn was full up in heaven or whatever, and they're like, you guys got to hang out or something, you can kind of rationalize your way into this being a big moment for a lot of souls going into new bodies, right? And it just makes a lot of sense. So talk about Milton, and when did this notion first come to you?
Well, basically my entire life. This has been something that has been revealing itself to me through clues and dreams and coincidences, like Dr. Ballard calling me Milton. They've all added up. And a couple of years ago, I started co-hosting a podcast called Titanic Talk. And my network of Titanic colleagues really broadened. Authors, historians, descendants of passengers, wide actors from the films, you name it. And as that experience grew, I realized that I wanted to contribute my little bit to the Titanic legacy through Milton. When people say they're reincarnated, usually they say, oh, I was Henry VIII in a past life. Or, oh, yeah, I was Cary Grant. It's never anybody obscure. But for me, I feel as if I were Milton Long, who is very obscure. He's a tiny footnote in the Titanic story. So I was able to take what little information I had about him. I knew of where his travels were before he boarded the Titanic. A few firsthand accounts. I knew something about his family. So I did a very forensic investigation into his life. And the greatest tool that I had for that was a friendship he made while on Titanic with another young man who survived. That young man was named Jack Thayer, and he wrote a letter to Milton's parents, a condolence letter, and also to say about how special their son was, how bravely he'd faced the end, and Jack enclosed a photograph of himself to the family of Milton Long and requested if they could send him a photograph back of Milton. And that it read to me like a love letter. It was two men living in Edwardian times, a very repressed society, especially among first-class passengers. We're dealing with very wealthy elite folks here. And I thought, maybe I'm carrying the baton for Milton. I'm living the life he didn't get to live. So the premise of my book, it's a historical fantasy. It's not a biography of Milton Long. It's a fantasy about, Milton perishes on the Titanic, and it's very historically accurate about his passing. But he wakes up inside the body of a very extroverted, very openly happy person in modern New York City. So it becomes an odd couple story. You've got a buddy movie, two souls, one body, and they have to solve the mystery of Milton's unrequited love, which also is historically accurate. So I had a really good time writing that adventure together.
Yeah. I had David, I don't know if you know David Milburn, but he and his partner collect old photos that they go and like, look at these two guys. There's a little bit too much love in this. And so these are like forbidden photos, because oftentimes in a photo booth or in a private setting. and they all have these incredible stories attached to them. Whether that story is known or you just look and it just screams out of this photo, because obviously these earlier times you weren't able to be as open, if at all open, right? And there's that subtle hand on the thigh or whatever it
Yes.
is in these photos. And it's remarkable to think about these stories.
They're so touching. They're so touching, and
Yes.
you see once you look past the period clothing or
Right.
style of hair or mustache, but if you can just see the human beings, you see that it's really always been the same, and that affection and love and passion has always been the same in every generation. And of note, Jack Thayer, who survived, did not have a happy ending. He went on to marry and have 4 children, but he ultimately took his own life at the age of 50, and he had everything in the world going for him. But one of the things we have to remember about Titanic, and it's easy to say when you get swept up, oh, the movie and it's sinking, and oh, they got it, so and so lived and so didn't. But for the survivors, not only was it a horrendous 9/11 kind of disaster to witness and try and live through, but afterwards there was survivor's guilt and the post-traumatic stress. Jack Thayer was not a single suicide after Titanic. There were a lot of unhappy endings for survivors as well.
Yeah. It's easy to get comfortable with your own demise when you've watched so many people who are in one moment alive, and then you literally have to row your boat, turn your back on them, and hear them expire and know that they're dying by the second.
And Jack Thayer was on, he was, the men, young men especially, were not allowed in the boats. It was a women and children first scenario. So he was in the water and was able to survive standing on an upturned collapsible boat. So it was a miracle that he survived. And his testimony was one of the first to claim, and he illustrated it, of the ship breaking apart. And I mean, a lot of eyewitnesses swore it went down in one piece. And if you look at the early movies, it always goes down in as one. But he was the one that led to that conclusion that it split. And Dr. Ballard would not have located the wreck had the ship not split, because when he was searching in the deep waters, it was the debris field. When the ship broke apart, everything spilled out. The people, the clothing, the dishes, the luggage, the boilers. And that's what Dr. Ballard saw first. And he followed the debris field to the wreck. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. You think about, again, these lives, whether they were extinguished on that night or they go on and they do whatever they can to, and look, maybe some people were fine, but most everybody was irreparably harmed that night, and some never got over it. No. And we forget about that. That's not in the drama of Jack and his girl, the kid from steerage with the first class girl who's got a husband, we lose track of that.
Yeah, Kate Winslet's character went on to live to be 102 in the form of Gloria Stewart, and was wearing her diamond till the very end. So but that's good soap opera, and everybody likes a good story. And I've done that with my Kindred Spirits. I mean, it's a historical fantasy, and it is to be entertaining. It's juicy. It's got some steamy scenes in it. For Titanic fans, they get to interact with some of those famous Titanic characters like Molly Brown and Bruce Ismay. But it's also a very modern story.
It is a modern story. When you think about your connection to the movie, does anything else jump out at you? Like the Milton angle? Were you looking for Milton? What did the movie, when you look at that movie, Titanic, the 1997 one, what does that mean to you? Like, how does it move you?
Well, I went and saw it 8 times in the theater, so obviously I was enthralled. I was less enthralled with the story, the Romeo and Juliet sort of contrived story, but I was very captivated because I'm such an ocean liner fan that I was very captivated by the art direction, by the cinematography, by the wardrobe, by the attention to detail of, for even down to the extras. They got etiquette lessons. They all knew how to fold their napkins, how to bow or walk through a doorway. And I really appreciated the attention to detail that Cameron put into that aspect of the film. Interestingly, my podcast co-host was an actress who worked on that film.
Oh, no kidding.
She had a featured role in the film, and she pops up, First Class Woman was her name, but she pops up throughout the film as part of the community, because it was like a little town on board the Titanic. She's a citizen of that town. And I remember in 1996, we were living in Los Angeles, and she's like, "Oh, I've got this audition, Nelson, for this Titanic movie. And James Cameron wants us all to write a monologue from the point of view of a passenger." She goes, "I have no idea." Now, keep in mind, this was before everybody had Google in their hand. So she knew I was a Titanic buff. And I said, "I'll help you write your monologue. I know exactly who you should be, and come into my library and let me get the books and images for you." And she got the part. So, and here she is, 7 years later, still dining out on the success of Titanic, as she well should be, as everybody is, including James Cameron.
Yeah. We're coming up on Titanic weekend. Let's talk a little bit about that. And then I want to get into the book a little bit too.
Well, Titanic weekend, I'm kicking it off. I'm flying to Los Angeles to go aboard the historic Queen Mary, which is now docked in Long Beach, California. And they've turned the beautiful old ship into a hotel and I don't know, a convention center. It's got nightclubs, It's got restaurants, it's got everything. And Titanic Weekend is the name of basically a Titanic convention. And I'll be joining other authors, historians, podcast hosts. There's an expert on Edwardian style. So it'll be really a nice way to do that. And wrapping up on the Monday with a memorial service in the ship's chapel to remember everyone. And they asked me if I'd like to do something, and I'm actually going to read the inscription from Milton's tomb. His body was recovered, and he was interred with his parents in Massachusetts. Sadly, there were 8 plots, because I assume that his parents thought they would have more children, and they never eventuated. It's just Milton and his parents there. So it'll be very touching. And from there, on the actual anniversary of the sinking, April 15th, I will be in Los Angeles at my old stomping grounds, the Four Seasons Hotel on Doheny Drive. And I'm going to have a book signing at the Four Seasons on Tuesday, the 15th, from 4 to 6 in the afternoon, a little happy hour. We can celebrate the good things that Titanic has brought. I always point that out. While it was a sad event for sure, but look at the generations of explorers, artists, authors, history buffs. I mean, the silver lining, if there is one, to this kind of disaster is that it has made improved safety conditions for all people at sea, and it has spawned such interest, creative interest, that a lot of great material has eventuated out of that sad day.
Everybody sees me popping off the screen. I'm over here trying to get these links up. So let's do this real quick. You all know what I say. Buddy read, buy 2. There's the link for the book. You can go there and get that, and it's fantastic. And we also have here the link for all the details on Titanic Weekend. Now, is your book signing listed on Titanic Weekend, or should we put a link up for that too?
Yes, I think it is. The signing at the Queen Mary is there. So Titanic Weekend is in Long Beach this weekend. And then Tuesday in Los Angeles at the Four Seasons on Doheny. Then I'll be then I'm on the move, baby, because I'm
you're on the move, baby.
Come back to New York. I'm going to do a couple of events in New York. I'm going up to Boston to a Titanic exhibition in Boston, May 14th. I'll do a signing there. I'm going to hit Baltimore, because Baltimore is a very nautical town. I'm doing that in July. And it's funny because, the simpatico of Titanic always finds me. And I was at one of my favorite places in Baltimore. It's called Gia's Italian restaurant in Little Italy. I'm having some chicken parm and talking to Gia, who's, she's like, got to be like my mother's age, whatever. And I'm like, yeah,
Right.
Gia, so I got a new book about Titanic. She's like, did you know I came over on the Andrea Doria? I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Wow.
So all the connections. And then I'm ending up in London at the end of May. I'm ending up in Australia in December. But the big thing for me that I'm really excited about, and I'm excited about all of them, but at the end of May, I'm going to Belfast, Ireland, where to the very dock, where shipyard, where Titanic was built, in Belfast at the Harland and Wolff shipyards. And the last time I was in Belfast was like 20 years ago, and there was nothing there, a couple of cranes. It was very, it was depressing, because it's like, where's the memory of Titanic? Since I have been away, they have built a world-class, unbelievable Titanic museum. Thomas Andrew, the designers, his offices are now converted into the Titanic Hotel in Belfast, where I will be doing a book signing in Thomas Andrews' offices. And they've built a Titanic distillers where I'll be doing a signing. And it's perfect because the book is called Kindred Spirits, and they have a Titanic alcohol called Kindred Spirits. So
is that coincidental? How'd that happen?
My life, you could say it's coincidences, right? But my whole life is coincidence.
Yeah.
It has been like that my entire life. My dreams, my passions, happenstance. So I don't know if you remember, if you were a Seinfeld fan, there was an early episode of Seinfeld where Julia Louis-Dreyfus says to this woman, "Oh, it's a coincidence." Don't you think? And she says, "There are no coincidences. There are no big coincidences or little coincidences." Yeah, and it's really true. I don't think there are coincidences. I think it's all orchestrated by something or somebody else. It's happy when it turns out well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious about Milton. So when you are called Milton by the guy who finds the Titanic, when that happens, did you already know you and Milton were the same, or how did you find Milton? How did Milton find you? Is there a genesis moment on this thing?
Yes. Well, actually, yes. And it was before, I mean, Dr. Ballard just sort of confirmed my suspicions. But I had, and I go into this in the book, all the sort of the path. But it started as a kid. I was hyper fascinated, bordering on obsession with ocean liner disasters. And it didn't matter if it was the Andrea Doria, the Lusitania, the Titanic. I was very captivated, and I have the tattoos to prove it, with the Poseidon Adventure, the 1972 film from Irwin Allen. To the point of where I must have seen that at the movie theater 20 times. I became friends with the cast, lifelong friends with the cast, and would go to Titanic screenings, not Titanic, Poseidon Adventure screenings, and I wrote books on it. I mean, I was very involved with the Poseidon Adventure to a fanatical point. And everything I could get my hands on to read about Titanic, you have to remember, again, before the internet, this involved libraries. It involved bookstores. You didn't just Google or go down somebody's Instagram page and find things out. You had to really work for it. All my book reports, all my essays, everything I did at school, that if I could skew it to Titanic, it was about Titanic. And I had found a book I always assumed there was the story of Jack Thayer, who was, such an eyewitness, a helpful eyewitness to the ship sinking. And he always mentioned his friend. And it wasn't named Milton. It was Jack and his friend. And he told the story of how they left the ship, how he survived and his friend did not. And then one day, I think maybe in the early 1980s, I was in a bookstore in the South Street Seaport here in New York City. And there was a new book. And it named the friend as Milton Long. And having been mistakenly called Milton, and I enunciate pretty well. Nobody should be. I mean, I can understand if you say Nelson and maybe you think it's Norman or something, but Milton's a pretty weird name. That's pretty much of a reach. So when I saw Milton, it made sense to me that and the way Milton's death was described by Jack is exactly the recurring dream I have had and continue to have my whole life, which doesn't have anything to do with the ocean. I dream I'm sliding down a banister like we all did when we were kids. But instead of getting to the bottom of the banister and, getting off, I kept going into the blackness. It was just like the eternal banister slide. And Jack described Milton's death. Jack was the better swimmer. So he pushed himself off the deck to make a swim for it. Whereas Milton, the poorer swimmer, straddled the railing, which was at an angle as the ship descended, and figured he'd slide his way down the railing till he hit the water and then swim from there. However, as Jack described it, he just kept getting pulled into the black waters. So there is, an undeniable similarity to that, I think.
That is crazy, man. That is crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to slide down a banister in your dream for whatever reason, but that's how that dude goes. Does he talk about their last moments together? Like, and I mean, obviously he describes his passing, but like, at some point it's the last time you're going to speak to each other. Does he talk about that?
I quote the letter in my book. I quote Jack's letter to Milton's parents. And that's a tremendous source of background information for me that says a lot about that. I mean, they had a very brief friendship. They were only on the ship for a few days, but they didn't introduce themselves to each other until the night of the sinking. Which feeds it. Milton was known as being very shy. He enrolled in both Harvard and Columbia and never graduated from either. He was very lost. He was coming onto the Titanic after a holiday in San Moritz. Very privileged, no doubt.
Wow.
But lost. No friends, no family other than his parents. 2 failed attempts at an education. His death certificate reads "Gentleman of Leisure" as his occupation. Meanwhile, Jack came from a railroad family and went on to a very successful financial career. Milton was really lost, but in Jack's letter, he was so touched by his quick, instant friendship with Milton that it makes me think there is more to that than meets the eye.
Sure.
And he was, if reading between the lines, he was trying to express as much as he could under the constraints of the time to Milton's family. And I would point out that it was Jack who introduced himself to Milton. Milton, by all accounts, just didn't have that outgoing personality that Jack did. There's one photograph of Milton that exists, and he doesn't look happy. And there are plenty of photographs of Jack, and I would point out that all of them taken before 1912. He is a beautiful young man with a wide smile, and he looks very contemporary. He looks like a modern, handsome, J. Crew model. All the pictures of him after 1912, there are no smiles. I never see him smiling again. The same with his mother, who survived. She was known as being very outgoing and very personable. And there are a lot of photos of her before the Titanic smiling, but not after.
Yeah. This is an aside, but I have to mention it because we're talking about ships and sinking and everything. In my hometown lives the last living survivor of the USS Indianapolis sinking during World War II. And this will give us a little bit of a hint as to why it can be so dark for these folks. The one thing that anybody ever wants to talk to him about is the worst night of his life, and then the following 5 days. And so I had him on the show. We talked about all that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, let's have him back to not just talk about this horrible thing, because he's done other things, and he didn't have the skilled words to talk about these other times of his life. And so really he is kind of trapped in this amber of time where that version of him is him in so many times. And he's not allowed to be anything else, even to himself, and it's an interesting thing. So Harold Bray, by the way, everybody, Harold Bray got a statue in our town. We're super proud of him. And it's neat to have him there, but it definitely, there is darkness that comes with these things.
You hear that a lot. You hear that a lot about war heroes and people who have served, and they don't want to talk about it. It's counterintuitive. Like my dad, he was in the Korean War. You couldn't shut him up about it, but there were for him it was just like one long episode of MASH. He had a great time. But
Yeah.
a lot of the people who saw serious, terrible things, they don't talk about it. I
Yeah.
used to. I'm a runner, and I went through a phase where I did the Honolulu Marathon every year, and it was in December, so it would usually coincide with Pearl Harbor Day. And one of my things as a history buff and as a nautical buff, I would make a lot of annual pilgrimages to the Pearl Harbor Memorial. And up until recently, there were usually a few Pearl Harbor veterans there to speak with, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to thank a veteran.
It's a heavy place. It's a heavy place. I mean, I've been one time, and I was as a kid, but
go back as an adult. You'll see it in a new light with the experience of time. And I remind people about this, about Titanic as well. When I love going to the exhibitions. Are you kidding? I'm there. The Boston signing is the next one. I'm still going to these things, but I don't believe that the wreck should be exploited. And now we've got, even Dr. Ballard says, we've done all the digital exploring with the cameras, and we can recreate it through AI. It's the final resting place of over 1,000 people. It's a grave. So maybe just leave it be. However, I'm also an explorer and love my artifacts. The debris field from the ship breaking and all the things that we love to see in the exhibitions, the teacups and the plates and the
wallets,
the perfume bottles and the boots, that's fair game. And quite frankly, that elicits more of a personal response to me to see a life vest. That's worth more to me than looking at a deteriorating passageway.
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff's inaccessible now anyhow, right? As the ship continues to get closer and closer to being just a pile on the bottom of the ocean floor.
Yes.
It's definitely, there it does come a time. We have to study it to understand it. Definitely a passion for it. I remember right before they raised it, like if they could find it, if it was made out of solid gold, it wouldn't be worth the money to raise it. But I bet you that they have made a lot of money, and all the pieces that they have brought up. I mean, all the stuff, that came up from the bottom of the ocean has brought in a lot of money.
Oh, when they first,
plus movies and everything else.
Yeah. They first started harvesting because there were vast amounts of coal, because the Titanic was powered. They're shoveling the coal into the furnace, and there were huge fields of coal around Titanic. And you could buy a lump of Titanic coal that was, maybe the size of a marble. I did it. I had it in a little display case. I thought that was the coolest thing. Eventually, I passed it on to a young Titanic fan that I know. But everybody wants it. Everybody, whether they have a past life or not, everybody has a connection to Titanic. It's a story that it reaches across demographic and time.
You mentioned coal. When you read books about old seafaring times in that era, like if you had a warship and it went into a port to gather coal, they put coal in every possible spot, to include on top of the deck. It'd be loaded down because that was their fuel. That's how they lived. And if you ran out, you had to come back in. And so, coal was a big deal. We don't see that kind of, most of us don't see coal for even 1 second, right? But we still consume a lot of it. And back then it was really the lifeblood for any kind of international travel, because you couldn't fly anywhere. Not back then, at least.
A really interesting aspect that a lot of people don't think about makes
sense.
As
predicted, sirens.
Here in New York City, I either get the church bells or the sirens. So it's a crapshoot. Well, I can tell you, it's not the top of the hour. So no, my point being that the steamships of the day of Titanic, they were reliant. I mean, their main business model was the immigrant trade. So to fill up third class, they wanted to capitalize on the immigrant trade. And it was that income that allowed the shipping lines to make the luxurious first class cabins and amenities and beautiful dining experiences that we associate with these luxury liners. But it was really not the case. It was that they were there to serve the third class community.
Mm. You know, it's interesting when you say that, because cruising has become a very affordable and accessible thing. Sure, you can buy like the ultimate experience, but I would say a lot of those folks, they're on their own yachts or some other kind of thing. But you go on, people rave about cruises, and these are regular working folks. And
Yeah,
so
it's
that,
just
that is
another
sort of
way
the
of,
progeny of that time.
it's a modern recreational tool. I did 2 cruises this year, interestingly. The first one was for pleasure, and it was a yacht cruise, and that was spectacular because there were only, I think, 250 people on the yacht,
Yeah.
and just as many crew. So I mean it was really extravagant. That was awesome. And they actually, when they found out about my Titanic expertise, and people, it seems counterintuitive, yet people who go on cruises are usually Titanic fans. They're intrigued by the romance of the sea.
Yeah.
So I will probably be doing a Titanic speaking something or other on an upcoming one of those. And then I was invited on the maiden voyage of Cunard's newest liner, really spectacular, the Queen Anne. And that was in January. And they were doing an around the world thing, and they hired me to join up in New York and sail down to Miami. So I was on for 3 days speaking about entertainment, because I'm a showbiz guy. So I was lecturing to the passengers and doing Q&As and talking about that aspect of my career. But it was really elegant. And I said, you know what, the cruise ships that have the water slides for the kids and the zip lines, those are probably not for me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I get you. Yeah. That's family stuff, right? Yeah.
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 I'm just saying, you know, I don't have a family. So
right. There's nothing wrong with, there's nothing wrong with just having a chilled adult kind of thing. Like I see those cruise lines and what's that?
I've just got me and Milton.
You and Milton. Right. Exactly. Yeah. I find the Viking cruise down the European rivers and that kind of thing, that's just the stuff of dreams. You see that, like, how do I get on one of those boats? It looks incredible.
I want to do one of those too.
Yeah. The you mentioned the entertainment stuff, and quite often, like, these books turn into something else. Are you going to try to make this into a feature, or what are your thoughts?
I don't write books with that intention. I have another series called Dancing Between the Raindrops, which I've written. There are 2 of those books out now. The third one will be coming out next year. So we'll have a nice little box set trilogy. To me, that seems like, oh my God, this is the perfect Netflix series. Dancing Between the Raindrops, those stories, it's very Jackie Collins, steamy, sexy, 80s, 90s, Hollywood, glitz, glamour, lots of name dropping. But with Kindred Spirits, I wanted to just tell Milton's story. However, being in the business that I'm in, I'm delighted by how touched people have been by the love story here, and it's not, you're never going to make a Titanic movie that's like James Cameron's Titanic. You're never going to do a blockbuster like that. But it doesn't mean there aren't other Titanic stories to be told. It's not about the sinking. It's not about the special effects of the ship. This is an intimate story about someone whose life was cut short and finds redemption after the event. So yeah, we are actually having a few conversations about that. So that would be cool if it were to happen. But regardless, I just think it's cool. Here we are. Next week is the 113th anniversary of Titanic. Until now, Milton's name has really just been a little teeny tiny footnote in the story of Titanic. Right. But here we are, 113 years later. He's getting his time. Like, we're saying his name. We're having conversations about him. We're remembering him. It's, I think that's really, I'm proud of that.
You should be. Yeah. I'm always a big proponent of, like, when you pass, someone writes about 150 words about you, and then that's it from almost all of us. And we do have a chance to do something else and grab someone from history. Billy the Kid was lost to history until someone like you went back and said, tell me about some of these crazy stories. And they found Billy the Kid and resurrected him from the dead. And now if he's not the first name from that era, he's in the top 3 that you think about when you think about the Old West. And here was this guy. So it could be that Milton becomes something else, or there's another Milton on there that turns into a thing. And I've always thought about this about Titanic, because the movies are always blockbusters. They're always big. If you got in tight and just were like cabin to cabin, and you told a story, whether it's weaving several families together into something where you go back to Sweden or you go to France or whatever it is, you could tell a really tight story without having a $500 million budget look like half of your budget. You really could make something that was powerful, because I like this concept. Maybe you'll get this. I like when you think about like a twist of fate, right? But with the Titanic, it's a fated twist. And there's something dark to that too. And so it's always coming, right? And so wherever the story is, at some point, it's going to stop and it becomes this other thing.
It's funny you mentioned that. It reminds me of, there are two Instagram accounts that really move me. And one is remembers AIDS victims. And every day they post a photo of someone who passed away of AIDS with a recollection of that person from someone who loved them. And it's always very touching, and it's great that they're being remembered. And there's another account that does something similar with victims of 9/11. And so every day it pops up on my feed. There's someone who passed away from AIDS. There's someone who passed away in 9/11. And they're not maudlin, depressing stories. They're celebrations of that person's life, and and I don't know. I think that's terrific, and that's what social media should be used for. It's nice when social media works the way it's supposed to.
There's one of those for World War II as well, and it's not just telling the big heroes that we might know, but it's like, here comes Roz. Roz decided to give her life up as a teacher and go become a nurse. And then she did all of this stuff that, no woman had ever done, because now you've got a woman who's not in combat, but she's combat adjacent. She's flying on airplanes. She's the first person to put hands on people. They're dying, And so this channel does that. And they look at all of these people's great and grandparents, if you're old enough to have grandparents that were World War II people like me. And they tell their stories once again. And it's just regular folks who said, it's time for me to go do something great. And then they do, in their little world, they did something incredible that they could always be proud of. And it's neat to have those moments. The people, gosh, the AIDS thing was so awful. Right? It was just like all the time losing people. It was like just unceasing.
Well, that circles back to my previous book, the Dancing Between the Raindrops. People were always, oh, you've had such a fascinating life. You've interviewed everybody. You should, you should write your memoirs. And my brain's fried. I can't remember everything exactly as they happened. So if you're going to write your memoir, you'd better be accurate. So what I did is I fictionalized it. And my dad, because I was a naughty boy in the 80s running around New York City. And my dad, who was a tremendous influence on me, used to say to me every time I'd come home, he'd say, son, I don't know how you survive in New York City. It's like you're dancing between the raindrops. Yeah. And so that's what I called my books. It's Dancing Between the Raindrops. That's the first book. That's the 1980s in New York. And then I moved to Hollywood for 22 years and hadn't enjoyed a television career. So that's the second book. And then the third book coming next year is my happily ever after, when I moved back to New York, fell in love, got married, built my dream home, and became a Titanic author.
Who knew? Is there another Titanic book in you?
It was really sad when I reached the end of Kindred Spirits, because it was like, I had set up this buddy movie with Milton and modern me. And I really liked us hanging out together. I was like, this could be a sitcom almost, a sexy sitcom, because, they were getting into, Milton was fulfilling all the things he could never fulfill in life. Yeah. However, it was time to end that. But as you said, there are a million, well, there aren't a million, but there are at least 2,000 Titanic stories to tell. And you never know. But nobody else from Titanic history is going to grab me personally the way that Milton's been such my buddy. In fact, I'm a singer. And last year I did a Tony Bennett tribute show here in New York, and was very, very honored that it won 3 Broadway World Cabaret Awards, including Best Show.
Dang.
So I'm
Yeah.
so busy this year with Kindred Spirits stuff. I'm like, well, I have no time to sing this year. Everything has to be about Kindred Spirits in 2025. And they said, Nelson, you won Best Show last year. You need to follow something up musically this year, or what was the point? So I thought, all right, I know. Kindred Spirits, the musical.
I love a musical.
So in July, and all of this is on nelsonaspen.com. All of my website has all my different things going on. But in July, I will be doing a cabaret version of Kindred Spirits. Well, I'll tell stories. I'll have visuals of Milton and my experiences with Titanic, and sing some appropriate songs that will match the story of what I've gone through with Milton. So yeah, we'll just keep, you find something that works, you just stick with it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I love a musical. It's fun to do. And where's it going to be? Is it going to be Broadway, off Broadway,
It's going to be right here off Broadway. We have a beautiful network of cabaret theaters here in New York City, and the place where I'm doing it, and it was all intentional since it's a cabaret show about my past life. I'm doing it at the place called Don't Tell Mama, which is where I did my very first cabaret show in 1987 with the same musical director I used in 1987.
No kidding.
The same manager is still working that theater as 1987. So we're all going to sort of come back together for this reincarnation story. So I'm really looking forward to it.
That is so much fun. I love that. It just so happens that it is probably not going to happen, but it is in the realm of possibility still that one of my projects will get turned into a musical. And it's the guy who loves the story has got a thing with baseball and his family, and of course they make things on Broadway, and so it is possible that you and I will be out there walking around on Broadway.
We haven't had a good baseball musical since Damn Yankees. So
I know, right? Like, look at me. I'm dancing like I'm at a musical, and got my hat. But it can happen, right? And the story is powerful, and it's everything is there, right? It's just. Every single project that happens was a long shot, for most of its existence until it became an actual thing. So we'll see how it goes, but everything looks like it might happen for right now. It's all about money. We can write the words, but
what it is. And I find this is one of the themes in Dancing Between the Raindrops. And I find myself saying it at least once a day to people. That's showbiz. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And you just kind of have to shrug and go, that's showbiz, because you can only do what you can do. And everything else is up to luck, money, a connection, timing. It really, all you can do is what you can do. And everything else is just, that's showbiz.
But you do have to pour your heart into it, right? Well, you have to pull as hard as you can. That's the thing that's crazy about it. You have to pull until you go, that's it. Done.
And even if it doesn't get made, sometimes it's about the journey, not the final result.
Right.
And I never,
you might,
I never thought
I'd meet the person.
Yeah, I never thought I'd meet the people I'd meet. I never thought I'd write a book, let alone 9. I never thought I'd have a TV career, let alone one that went for 30 years. You just don't know. But you have to be willing to try hard, as you just said, with your heart, but also just to say yes. To say yes to crazy opportunities that you don't think, oh, maybe that's not going to lead anywhere, but at least it's a paycheck. Well, you don't know who you're going to meet or what it's going to lead to.
Like making a musical about baseball. It's like, well, of course, let's try. Let's see what happens, right? Because you're right. Like someone sees you work, they see the production, they see the quality of the talent, whatever it is, and they're like, not this, but this, and so you don't get to do the thing that you wanted to do, but that turns into the next thing that you want to do. And that's showbiz, right?
That's exactly right. And that's showbiz.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to wrap this up so that you can go on about your day and everything else, but let's really quick plug all the big things. So obviously, everybody can look and see NaspenNelson.com, and then I'm going to put your book link right here.
Oh,
Kindred Spirits.
That's the most important one. The book. And Kindred Spirits and Nelson Aspen. You can find me. It's so easy. Instagram, X, Threads, the website, the book signings. Just I'm really the easiest person in the world to pinpoint.
And then your immediate schedule, where you're going to be the next week. Just tell everybody about that.
This weekend, Titanic weekend on board the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. So I'll be there Saturday, Sunday, and departing on Monday morning. Is zooming up to Beverly Hills to go to the Four Seasons on Doheny Drive for the actual 113th anniversary of Titanic sinking on April 15th. Book signing on Tuesday the 15th at the Four Seasons from 4 to 6 p.m. Then I'll zoom back to New York, and the next two signings are in New York, April 29th in Harlem and May 2nd in the Upper West Side. All those details are on my website. We'll, of course, hit Boston, London, Belfast, Baltimore, Sydney, Australia. So if you're in anywhere, in any of those vicinities, you can find me. If not, you can find me on social media.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to turn this thing off. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. For sure, go support Nelson's work. Here, one more time, is the link for the book. Look, just go to Amazon and type in Kindred Spirits. You guys know what to do with this. And I'll come back in a moment here, Nelson, and say goodbye to you. Everybody else, take care, and I'll talk